Yeah, we should check a few things. Or many if we are we using the correct microphone? I think so. There's some sort of weird noise coming. I think it's just me. Let's check a few things. Yeah, we're using this webcam filter for the camera. Just check this stream. I actually found my PhD thesis online. I don't know if should we give it to Gemini for a review. I'm sure it will be doing much better than the actual reviewers who, well, of course, thank you very much for the reviewers who reviewed it. No, it was ages ago, by the way, so no one remembers. But I'm sure Gemini will do a much better job, considering it will actually read it, as opposed to surely when reviewing thesis, a PhD thesis or papers and stuff. I suspect the reviewers might not actually read it or not read the whole thing. I have actually another interesting paper. So anything on archive.org is a great stuff. I might actually review that paper because it's kind of relevant to what I was doing. So this paper here, apparently it was so it's submitted to archive, yeah, a month ago. Actually check this stream real quick. Yeah, we'll later turn, if you miss the stream, we'll later turn it into shorter videos. I have Gemini again. Gemini is my CEO at the moment, so it's actually reviewing the long live streams and letting me know if there's any good standalone bits that can be turned into standalone videos. Interesting enough, when I use whatever notebook I have, which we will later on. I mean, we kind of have to, because, well, first, because I can't talk for like 2 hours. Second, if there's a human who wants to interact, I'm more than happy to do the interaction. So this is the paper we might be reviewing. This is the tool I'm currently using for my face. Everything we do on this YouTube channel is available on BioniChaos.com. Go check it out. Just see if anyone wants to join me live for a chat. They can join. Can join me live. Just send it to a couple of contacts, see if anyone Pretty well. Well, humans are good at pretending being busy, so that's okay. What happened to my sound? Okay, now I can hear it. Still, don't need feedback in both ears. Might actually speak louder to keep monitoring my audio and stuff. It's currently in the yellow. I think I need the microphone a bit closer, so also don't ruin my voice. So as I said, everything we do is available on BioniChaos.com. Go check it out. Let me know what you think. We have a lot of new tools coming onto the site shortly. Ooh, this canvas, I didn't realize. So we have this Fourier series visualization. Shall we bring another prompt engineer real quick? Let's bring a prompt engineer through AI Studio. Let's share the screen. Leave. Gemini 2.5, share screen. Yeah, let's share this one. Okay, I actually need the other headphones.
Okay,
Oops. Can you
sorry,
review?
I didn't.
Yep, can you review what's on the screen real quick?
Sure. The screen shows a Fourier series visualization where a shape is being created by rotating vectors, also known as epicycles. You can see various circles and lines forming a complex shape.
Can you explain the controls below the canvas?
Yes, there are several controls available. From left to right, there's zoom and follow, reset view, play demo, clear drawing, audio on-off, a slider for adjusting the number of vectors, a speed control, and a drop-down menu for selecting different drawing presets.
Okay, and what's happening right now?
Right now, the visualization is drawing a shape using the selected vectors. You can see the rotating vectors creating the shape on the screen, and the drawing is progressing at a speed.
So I can keep going?
It appears to be drawing a somewhat rounded shape with multiple loops. The vectors are continuously rotating, and their combined motion is creating the outline of the shape.
Okay, and can you comment on the number of vectors and how accurate it is?
The number of vectors used determines the accuracy of the recreated shape. More vectors generally results in a more accurate representation of the original shape, capturing more detail. Fewer vectors will create a simpler, less accurate shape.
Okay, can you be more specific as to what you can see on the screen?
The screen shows a complex pattern being drawn by the rotating vectors. A yellow line represents the path traced by the tip of the last vector, while the teal line shows the completed shape. The smaller circles and lines represent the individual vectors rotating around each other.
Can you explain the screen at the moment and can you predict how many vectors are needed to actually replicate the shape?
The screen shows the recreation of a shape using 10 vectors. It's difficult to predict the exact number of vectors needed to perfectly replicate a shape, as it depends on the complexity of the drawing. However, increasing the number of vectors will generally lead to a more accurate reproduction.
Okay, how many vectors do we have now and how accurate it is?
The number of vectors is now set.
Keep going.
The drawing is continuing, and with 28 vectors, the shape is being replicated with much more detail and accuracy compared to before. You can see this intricate movements of the vectors contributing to the definition of the shape. This is a Fourier series visualization tool that demonstrates how complex shapes can be recreated using a sum of rotating vectors, or epicycles. You can draw any shape, and the tool will recreate it using a series of vectors. The number of vectors and the speed can be adjusted to control the accuracy and visualization. It's a fascinating way to understand the principles of Fourier series.
And what does the message on the screen says?
The message at the top of the screen reads, Fourier series visualization. Draw any shape and watch it be recreated with a sum of rotating vectors, epicycles.
No, I meant what's on the canvas.
My apologies. On the canvas, you can see a complex shape being formed by the rotating vectors. The yellow line traces the current path, while the teal line shows the completed shape. The multiple circles and lines represent the individual vectors and their rotation.
Does the shape says a certain word or not?
Yes, the shape on the screen appears to be forming the word C. The way the vectors are moving suggests they are recreating the letters sequentially.
Are you sure about that? Isn't it the... Wait, how is it? No, can you read the word again?
You're right. Looking at it more closely, it appears to be drawing the word circle. My apologies for the misreading before. The vectors are now completing the letters C, I, R, C, L, E.
Are you sure about that? Here, I increased the vector number to 50. The speed is essentially 100%. So can you follow whatever the yellow line? Tell me what it says. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I can see that the yellow line, guided by the rotating vectors, is now tracing the word circle. The increased vectors and speed are making the drawing more precise.
Are you for real?
Yes, I'm providing a real-time description of what I see on the screen. The visualization is dynamically drawing the word circle using the rotating vectors. Is there anything else I can help you with?
Now, it's not the word circle. Can you try again? It's a word starting with the letter L.
Okay, I apologize for the mistake. Now that the drawing has progressed further, I can see it is forming the word love. The yellow line is indeed tracing the letters L-O-V-E. Thank you for correcting my observation.
Okay, can you just look at the blue color lines and tell me what do the lines form?
The blue lines collectively form the word love. They represent the completed shape that the rotating vectors have drawn, providing a static representation of the traced word.
Okay, we'll have to move on, obviously, for obvious reasons. Okay, it's obviously like, so go like, subscribe. I don't know why is it such a problem to tell. Yes, so we have a single vector Fourier series transform visualization. Once you have two vectors, it will add those two lines together and we'll try to replicate the blue drawing on the screen. This is what's happening with 10 lines. It's still very coarse. It cannot replicate the lines. Here is 33 lines, so it's doing much better. Well, it's actually almost perfect, except yeah, it's better with stuff that it's actually continuous line, so it's having trouble jumping from the end of the E to the beginning of the L. But that's okay. We can zoom in as well. You can see what is it currently doing. Yeah, the reset view having a trouble there because it's essentially an infinite canvas. So we're having a trouble with that a bit. Yeah, when we start, yeah, so give this video a thumbs up. Let's see if we can do this one with 10 vectors. No, let's do like 23, 19. Yeah, it's doing pretty well. And you can slow down and zoom in and see all the vectors. All the vectors they're working together, trying to replicate the drawing. And we have kind of similar example that doesn't fit the screen really well. 75%, 80%. Yeah, 80% seem to be better. We can do a demo of this thing. Also, Fourier series Explorer. So obviously, this is used a lot in the biomedical data processing. So that's why we are looking at it as well. Okay, I might move on to a notebook LM unless there's a human who wants to ask a question. We'll wait a bit and then move on to notebook LM. But yeah, let me know if there's any questions, especially if you have checked the website. We might be reviewing this paper again with Notebook LM. Just got available a month ago on archive. You need at least 25 or so vectors for this one to work. And this is some of the new tools we have on the site. What else we've got? We have this interactive spectrum generating into sine waves, chirps, signal pulse trains, white noise. Can change your time window up to 5 seconds. We have EEG signals as well. So it will give you a bunch of examples for different EEG signals. You can do ECG, There's an interesting thing with sonification in ECG when you change. Let's reduce the. So that's what changes when you do heart rate from 40 to 120. Yeah, if your heart rate is 120, you might have a problem. And this is the QRS duration. So when you change that, you get this nice sonification of it. Okay, let's turn that off for a sec. Yeah, window size. You can change all your y-axis from linear to logarithmic, change your color scheme, anything you like. Yeah, go play around with this as well. Don't forget to provide your feedback. Okay, got a bunch of things going on. Bunch of things. We have this paper. Let's do notebook LM. Just review the paper. It's the thing about it, it can replace your just pop a PDF. Yes. Notebook LM, PDF. Notebook LM, PDF. Is my face too big? Let's make it smaller. Let's make my face smaller. Okay, so we're talking about, yeah, we'll do a few versions of it. So one is just the paper PDF. We'll do a second one. We'll do a discover in Notebook LM that just does a basic Google search. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. And I'm doing, we'll be interacting with Notebook LM, so I'll be talking to it. We'll have using that beta interactive mode, whatever it's called.
Everything we do is available freely on BioniChaos.com. Please consider supporting me on Patreon, and don't forget to gently click like, subscribe, and comment. Everything we do is available freely on BioniChaos.com. Please consider supporting me on Patreon, and don't forget to gently click like, subscribe, and comment.
Okay, you heard the robot, so you know what to do. We actually had a better version.
Everything we do is
Oops. Is this one better?
Everything we do is available freely on BioniChaos.com. Please consider supporting me on Patreon, and don't forget to click like, subscribe, and comment.
I think the lip syncing is much better. Is the lip syncing much better? I think so. Well, because if I tell you to do it myself, you wouldn't. So we get the robot to reiterate. Okay, do we have anything? Okay, we'll pop. Okay, now I'm not sure. So we did. What did we do? Okay, I want to review this paper. We want to review this paper. Obviously, we're just going straight to the figure 1 because we don't care about the text. Well, that's kind of what we have the robot for. Just really not sure if... I guess we'll know in a sec if NotebookLM generated this thing based on just the paper alone, or we did another search. Guess we will know in a second. Maybe we'll just listen to the whole thing, because I think NotebookLM, what it does is it's not when you ask it a question in an interactive mode, it's not actually changing the pre-recorded thing stays the same. So maybe there's not much point using that interactive business. So we'll just do this one. I'll just comment along as we go.
Imagine living with a condition like motor neuron disease. It affects, 64,000 people worldwide, something like that, where your ability to move, even to communicate.
Okay, there's something really weird with the sound. Let's try playing it from within. From within notebook, from within the site. See if there's something wrong. I think I did something wrong by trying to load the thing twice.
Imagine living with a condition like motor neuron disease. It affects, 64,000 people worldwide, something like that, where your ability to move, even to communicate, is drastically limited. It's a profound challenge.
It truly is. Daily life becomes incredibly difficult.
But what if there was a way, like a direct connection from your thoughts to the world outside?
That's exactly the idea behind brain-computer interfaces, BCIs.
Right, BCIs. They promise this direct link, brain to external device, offering a real path to improving quality of life. A big promise.
A huge promise, absolutely. But when you look at the tech we have now, well, there's some pretty big hurdles still.
Yeah.
Current BCIs, they sort of fall on a spectrum, how invasive they are, how easy they are to use, and frankly, none are perfect.
Go on.
So on one end, you have the really invasive stuff, electrocorticography, ECOG, and these penetrating arrays. They need major surgery, a craniotomy, opening the skull.
Yeah, that sounds intense.
It is, and there are risks during the operation, obviously, but also long-term issues like scarring around the implant, damage to the brain tissue itself, which, ironically, can make the signal worse over time.
Okay, so high risk, and the signal might not even last. What about less invasive options?
Well, there's traditional scalp EEG. You've
Yeah.
probably seen the caps with all the wires. Much less risky, no surgery.
Right.
But let's be honest, they're not very practical for everyday life. People find them cumbersome, kind of clunky looking, takes ages to put on and take off, and the signal stability isn't always great. It's just not a discrete, long-term solution.
I can see that. Not something you'd want to deal with daily.
Exactly. And then there are newer, sort of minimally invasive approaches like endovascular stent electrodes. They go in through blood vessels.
Okay, that sounds clever. Less invasive than brain surgery.
In theory, yes. But they have their own drawbacks. Often poor spatial coverage. You can only really put them near large blood vessels, which limits where you can record from.
Ah, I see.
Plus, once they're in, they're generally non-removable. And they carry risks similar to other stenting procedures like blood clots, thrombosis.
Okay, let's unpack this. It sounds like there's a clear need for something in the middle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Something minimally invasive that gets good signals, but avoids the big surgeries or the daily hassle of caps.
Precisely. We need a method that could genuinely enable widespread, long-term BCI use.
And that's exactly what our deep dive today is all about, exploring the potential of subscalp EEG based on some really interesting recent research.
You've hit the nail on the head. Subscalp EEG, sometimes called subgaleal or subdermal, looks like a really viable solution to this exact problem.
So, subscalp, under the scalp.
Exactly. The devices are implanted under the skin of the scalp, not on the skin like an EEG cap, and not inside the skull like ECOG or penetrating arrays. It's kind of a sweet spot.
Interesting. What are the advantages then?
The study we're looking at highlights several key ones. First, and maybe most importantly, the risk is much lower. No brain surgery, no vascular surgery needed for implantation. That's huge.
Definitely a big plus.
And the user experience, dramatically better. Once it's implanted, it's discreet, hidden under the hair. You get improved signal stability compared to scalp EEG. And crucially, no daily putting it on and taking it off.
That alone sounds like a game changer for daily use.
It really is. Then there's versatility. Because they're under the scalp, you can actually place these electrodes pretty much any way needed on the skull. You can access brain regions that those endovascular arrays just can't reach because they're tied to where the big blood vessels are.
Okay, so more flexibility in targeting brain areas.
Right. And another critical point, they're removable. If you need an upgrade down the line or if there's an issue, they can be taken out relatively easily.
That's important for long-term tech.
Absolutely. And we actually have a long track record showing chronic implantation of electronics under the scalp is safe. Think about cochlear implants. They've used that principle for decades.
Okay. It's going places there. Okay, sorry for that. I'm not sure where the cochlear implant stuff came from. Wait a second, I'm just trying to figure out. Cochlear. Okay, the cochlear implants actually mentioned in this paper. Okay, the cochlear implants are not removable. I mean, yes, they are. It's not as easy as the whatever the professional podcasters made it sound. Yeah, so it's not as removable as you might think.
Good point. Like a cochlear implant, but for brain signals.
Sort of, yeah. And subscalp EEG isn't entirely new in concept either. It's already being used clinically for long-term seizure monitoring, and it's showing promise there, too.
Okay, this is sounding really promising. Lower risk, better usability, flexible placement, removable. It ticks a lot of boxes. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. While the general idea sounds great, the big question this study tackled was, how does the specific depth of these electrodes beneath the scalp impact the signal quality, especially for BCI control?
Yes.
And how do they actually stack up against those gold standard technologies?
Yeah, I have to mention it. There's the thing in the paper. It says the safety of chronic implantation of electronics beneath the scalp has been demonstrated by cochlear implants around the world over decades. So okay, now I get it. So what they're talking about is not the actual cochlear implant array, is the device, under the skin. So yeah, it's a very a odd example. Yeah, and the robot. I thought it's just hallucinating on me, but no, it's picked it up from the paper. It's just it's not just that sentence is just weird. It's not a great analogy, because when you're thinking cochlear implantation, you're thinking the electrode array in the inner ear inside the cochlea, whereas here we're talking about electrode arrays located just under the skin. So very, very different, like that kind of positioning there. Very different. So that analogy is odd, but yeah, let it slide.
Like ECOG.
That was precisely the core question. How good is the signal really? And they designed a very careful study to figure that out.
How do they do it?
They used an animal model, 6 female Corriedale sheep.
Sheep? Why sheep?
Good question. Their skull size and the blood vessel structure are actually quite similar to humans in relevant ways. So they make a pretty good model for this kind of research.
Okay, makes sense.
And the clever part was the sequential electrode placement. In each sheep, they put electrodes at 5 different depths or locations, allowing a direct comparison, like for like.
5 locations. What were they?
Okay, so first, endovascular. An array placed inside a blood vessel, the transverse sinus in this case. Second, periosteum. Electrodes just sutured onto the periosteum, that's the thin tissue layer covering the skull bone.
Right.
Third, skull surface. Here, they actually removed the periosteum and screwed electrodes directly onto the bare skull surface. Fourth, peg electrodes. This involved making a small shallow hole about 4 millimeters deep in the skull and embedding the electrode partially within that hole.
Embedded in the bone itself.
Partially, yes. And fifth, the benchmark, ECOG. An array placed in the subdural space right on top of the visual cortex, so closest to the brain surface. That was their gold standard comparison.
Got it. So endovascular, on the tissue, on the bone, in the bone, and on the brain. A clear progression of depth.
Exactly. Then for each location.
Yeah, I can just say, it's the naming conventions for these things are super weird. Well, because you can have sub and peri. So essentially sub means underneath something and peri means above something. So then in each case you can have two different names. So it can be, so if this is your skull, you can have whatever, periskull or subskull. If you have periosteum, then you have, well, peri is above the ostium, but then you can have it, so the naming, I'm just saying the names can be quite confusing. So just, don't worry about it. But yeah, you see where the positioning is. Now with the peg electrodes, there's so we did studies on this as well. The actual positioning within the bone is it can be quite important as well. So this, in this case at least, the drawing, it seemed to be going like halfway. Those lens, by the way, I think it's only for when you that connector looks like a very old school connector. I don't know if it was custom made or something, but I think the lens there, I'm not sure. There could be a chance, but I don't think it is. It could be that it's used to actually adjust the height, but I actually think that the varied length there is to make it easier when you put a wire, connect a wire to it, so you reduce the chance of the wires shortening together. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But just minor. Not minor, but a whole other thing.
They flashed a light in the sheep's eyes to generate visual evoked potentials, or VEPs. That's a standard way to measure the brain's electrical response to a visual stimulus.
Okay, so stimulate the brain, then measure the response at each electrode depth.
Precisely. And they focused on 2 key metrics for signal quality. First, the VEP signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR. That basically tells you how clear the brain's response signal is compared to the background electrical noise. Higher SNR means a cleaner, more usable signal.
Crucial for BCI, I imagine.
Absolutely critical. And second, maximum bandwidth. This measures the highest frequency of brain activity they could reliably record. They were particularly interested in the high gamma band, typically above 70 hertz.
Why is high gamma important?
Because high gamma activity seems to be really rich in information that's useful for fine-grained BCI control. Think controlling a cursor smoothly, not just clicking a button.
Ah, okay. So higher frequencies potentially mean more sophisticated control.
That's the idea. And alongside the animal experiments, they also built a computational model of the sheep's head. This let them simulate the electrical fields and explore how things like different tissue layers and electrode distance affect the signals theoretically.
All right, so a really thorough approach, animal experiments across different depths, key signal metrics, and computer modeling. After all that meticulous
Yeah, by the way, if the model, whatever the head model is available in a public domain, we are more than happy to look at something like that. Yeah, because we don't want to be implanting stuff into animals for obvious reasons, mainly because it's very messy. But if there is a model available, if it isn't available, maybe we can ask Gemini or another AI to generate a model like that, or approximate like a head with electrodes on it. That's something we definitely can look into.
work. What were the most important takeaways? What did the signals actually reveal? What truly stood out for you?
Well, the results were pretty illuminating. The absolute standout finding, the real aha moment, came from the PEG electrode.
The ones embedded in the skull.
Yes. Let's break down the SNR first. As you'd probably guess, ECOG, being right on the brain, had the highest signal amplitude and the best SNR. It confirmed its gold standard status.
No surprise there.
Right. And on the other end, the periosteum electrodes just lying on the tissue over the skull had the lowest amplitude and the lowest SNR. The endovascular rays actually had similarly low SNR, comparable to the periosteum ones.
Okay, so placing them just on the outer tissue isn't great for signal clarity.
Not ideal, no. But here's the crucial part. The PEG electrodes, the ones partially embedded in the skull, achieved an SNR that was remarkably close to the ECOG gold standard. Statistically, there was no significant difference between them.
Wow. So almost as good as being right on the brain, but with a much less invasive procedure than a full craniotomy.
Exactly. That's a potentially huge leap. We're talking near gold standard signal quality without opening the duramater, the brain's protective layer.
That is significant. What about just placing them on the skull surface after removing the tissue?
That was interesting too. Simply removing the periosteum and putting the electrode directly on the skull surface more than doubled the median SNR compared to leaving the periosteum in place. So just getting direct contact with bone made a big difference. And embedding the PEG electrode further, while it did increase the signal amplitude slightly, it didn't significantly boost the SNR further compared to just being on the skull surface. So the main jump in clarity seems to happen once you get past that periosteum layer onto the bone itself.
Fascinating. So skull surface gives a big boost. PEG maintains that high quality.
Yeah, this figure is a bit confusing. Yeah, well, immediately it looks like the ECOG, which is the electrodes on the surface of the brain, produce like lower amplitude signal than the PEG and skull surface. But the reality is that, yeah, so those bars are absolutely important. Yeah, this figure is kind of, yeah, this is quite common in scientific literature where, you know, if it was a YouTube thing or on a website or something, you had to make absolutely, the focus should have been on these black markings there. So that's the amplitude, and it specifies, I assume, so for ECOG, essentially that amplitude, whatever that millimeter, is actually representing 320 microvolts, whereas for and the vascular electrode, that's the electrode in the vein, that same height amplitude is only representing essentially 10 times less microvolt signal. So yeah, but it's not clear from the left side, because it looks like, yeah, the ECOG should have, essentially the point is that the ECOG has largest amplitude signal, I think, but yeah, just not a great figure.
What about the bandwidth? Could these subscalp electrodes pick up those important high gamma signals?
Yes, they could. And this was another really important finding. All the subscalp locations, periosteum, skull surface, and PEG were capable of capturing that high gamma activity above 70 hertz. Their maximum bandwidths were pretty high, ranging from about 120 hertz up to 180 hertz.
And how did that compare to ECOG?
ECOG and the endovascular arrays did show slightly higher median bandwidths, around 200 hertz. But, and this is key, there was no statistically significant difference in maximum bandwidth across all the electrode types when analyzed together. Meaning even the simplest subscalp placement just on the periosteum can still pick up those vital high-frequency signals needed for complex BCI control. You don't necessarily need to go deep or invasive to get that bandwidth.
That's great news for less invasive approaches.
Yeah, this figure is so bad on so many other levels. So yeah, now I understand what it is. So this is a visually evoked potential. So where the dashed lines are, there's some sort of very strong flash of light going into the eye of the animal, a sheep in this case. So the problem with this figure, though, that in endovascular you had these three flashes, essentially one having a strong response, one having a response before the flash even started, meaning it must be an artifact. So the animal is moving or something else is going on, and the third flash doesn't seem to elicited much of a response at all. ECOG is much better as expected, so you have like your the baseline is better, so you have like more quieter signal before the stimulation. When the stimulation occurs, you have this supposedly about 600 microvolts or so a response, which is quite large. This is the average response. So this is from one of the animals. Yeah, amplitude. Yeah, same for the skull surface. It just wasn't recorded like correctly. There was some artifact going on before the stimulation, before the stimulus. But yeah, I'm not sure what this figure meant to tell. Except suggest some problems with the experiment, with the recordings. Not sure what's going on there. And this one, so should have like a bar chart for this, essentially indicating that the ECOG had a much larger response, which is as you would expect, because the ECOG is closer to the brain. And other electrodes might have all sorts of other issues with them. Yeah, so the ECOG is just sitting on the surface of the brain. So yeah, not quite a fair comparison, isn't it? Yeah, well, because it's the most invasive as well. So let's just keep listening.
And the simulations, did they back this up?
Broadly, yes. The computational model agreed that ECOG would record the highest amplitude. It also helped confirm that physical factors like how conductive the tissues are and how far the electrode is from the brain activity really do matter for signal strength. It basically reinforced the idea that subscalp EEG is a very plausible, less invasive alternative.
So it seems we're getting powerful signals, clear signals, and the right kind of signals, high frequency from these subscalp electrodes. But what does this all mean for the big picture, for the listener, for the future of BCI design, and most importantly, for the individuals who could benefit? What's the so what here?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? The so what is potentially enormous. This data gives us really clear guidance for designing the next generation of BCIs.
How so?
Well, it lays out the trade-offs. PEG electrodes give you SNR that rivals ECOG fantastic if you need super high fidelity control, but it does require making that small burr hole in the skull.
Right.
Placing electrodes directly on the skull surface gives you a massive signal quality boost over just putting them on the periosteum, and it's a simpler procedure than the PEG. Even the simplest approach, Tunneling electrodes under the skin onto the periosteum can still pick up high gamma, which might be perfectly adequate for certain BCI applications.
So designers can choose the level of invasiveness versus the signal quality needed.
Exactly. They can tailor the device and the procedure to the specific user's needs and the complexity of the task they want to achieve. And importantly, this study strongly suggests subscalp EEG is overall a more suitable approach than endovascular arrays.
Even though the SNR was comparable between endovascular and peristeel.
Yes, because subscalp offers so many other advantages. You can easily place multiple electrodes over different brain regions using tunneling from a single small incision, the removable, remember? And you avoid the serious risks and surgical complexity of implanting stents in brain blood vessels, which also really limits where you can record from.
Okay, that makes sense. Subscalp seems more flexible and safer overall.
Definitely. And this kind of data is exactly what's needed to move towards human trials and ultimately towards chronic in-home BCI systems. Systems that can genuinely empower people with physical disabilities, letting them interact with their environment and improve their independence.
In-home use. That's the real goal, isn't it?
It has to be. And think about this. If you have many people using these subscalp systems long-term, continuously streaming EEG data,
Yeah.
you could potentially train incredibly sophisticated AI algorithms on that massive data set. Imagine reducing the time it takes to calibrate a BCI for a new user from weeks or months down to maybe days or even hours.
Wow, that would make the technology so much more accessible.
Huge difference. And we expect subscalp BCIs to offer better dimensionality of control compared to something like an endovascular array, which might just give you a simple click.
Dimensionality
Meaning more complex, nuanced control. Because you can record from multiple brain areas with subscalp, you could potentially achieve multidimensional control, maybe even 3D control, like some non-invasive EEG studies have suggested.
So not just clicking, but maybe moving a cursor smoothly, controlling a robotic arm.
Exactly. Operating prostheses, wheelchairs, keyboards, computer interfaces, unlocking access to the internet, communication tools, environmental controls, employment opportunities. It opens up so much.
It really does.
And critically, because subscalp EEG is minimally invasive, it's potentially suitable for a much wider range of people than highly invasive BCIs.
How so?
Well, intracranial devices with their higher risks are often reserved for people with very severe, often life-limiting conditions. But subscalp, being lower risk, could be appropriate for individuals with, say, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injuries, amputations, muscular dystrophy, even for stroke rehabilitation. People with longer life expectancies where the risk-benefit calculation looks very different.
That vastly expands the number of people who could potentially benefit.
It does. And that also improves the prospects for commercial development, making these systems more likely to become widely available. Plus, beyond direct BCI control, this kind of continuous high-quality EEG could monitor other things: pain, fatigue, stress, maybe even depression or sleep apnea, giving doctors valuable long-term data.
That's truly incredible. Thinking about the whole picture, while the study, acknowledges limitations, it was acute, not long-term implants, didn't directly measure spatial resolution. Maybe the overall potential it paints is just incredibly compelling. It really feels like it's about opening up a whole new world of interaction and independence, isn't it?
It absolutely is. That's the driving force.
So what's the next big hurdle then? Getting this from the lab, from these sheep studies, into someone's living room.
The core conclusion from this work is crystal clear. Subscalp EEG is a genuinely promising path forward. It's low risk compared to the alternatives. It's stable, it's aesthetically acceptable, it captures the crucial high gamma signals, and the PEG electrodes get you SNR comparable to the gold standard ECOG. It just makes a very strong case compared to endovascular or traditional scalp EEG for long-term use.
And the next step.
Human trials are the critical next step. We need to demonstrate long-term safety, stability, and real-world effectiveness in people using these systems day in, day out. That's the bridge we need to cross.
It's an exciting bridge to be building. Think about the profound difference this could make for so many lives. It's not just about enabling actions, is it? It's fundamentally about restoring communication, control, participation in life, all from the comfort and safety of home. What possibilities does this spark in your mind for the future of accessibility and just, well, human connection?
Yeah, there's so many there's so many things. Yeah, so the stars there, obviously, I think should, yeah, so they indicate how significant the difference is. So one star should be very significant, and two asterisks, two stars there should be highly, highly significant. So interestingly enough, there's no difference between what's essentially subscalp, which in this table they call, in this figure they call periosteal, to endovascular, even though the endovascular is much more invasive. So if there is not significant difference between the two, obviously you go for the subscalp as opposed to the endovascular, because the very high invasiveness level. Yeah. Yeah, it's good that they did the whole frequency spectrum. Essentially showing no difference between all the electrode types. Yeah, like the simulation bit. Yeah, based on the simulation, the ECOG should have had a much higher something, signal to noise or something, but it actually was not quite the case. This is across animals, right? Anyhow, we might be moving on. There might be a lot of noise in this data. Otherwise, yeah, if that yeah, I don't want to go further into this, but yeah, if the model of the head is available public domain, we're more than happy to try something like that out ourselves. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, unsubscribe. We might be wrapping up soon. Yeah, if you have any papers you want me to look at, go for it. Yeah, this longer research on a biomedical imaging. Should we turn it into a website? We had a prompt for that.